If you're in a fantasy football league trying to make your playoffs, trying to win your league, this is the video for you. Because in this video, we're breaking down 7 players who I consider some of the best stashes in fantasy football right now. The under-the-radar guys you could stash on your bench specifically for the fantasy postseason. And let's start with one that's not going to cost you basically any fab budget. Really, nobody's trying to add this guy. He's probably available on your waiver wire right now, and it's Darren Waller, the Miami Dolphins. He's currently on IR for the Dolphins, but he's expected to return around week 13, potentially week 14, sometime in there right before the fantasy playoffs. And now here's why this matters. We've seen Darren Waller basically only play 3 games this year. He signed with Miami. He didn't play till like week 6 or so, and then he ends up getting hurt. So he only played 3 real games. And in those 3 games, despite being ramped up and not seeing a full complement of snaps and routes runs in most of them, he averaged over 15 fantasy points per game. He was a huge red zone threat, 39 yards per game, 4 targets per game, huge red zone threat for this Miami offense. In the one game that he got to play, small sample 1 game, but at least it's worth bringing up, without Tyreek Hill, he had over 17 fantasy points, multiple red zone and end zone targets. This matters, especially because it's not like there's anybody else coming to save the day. Right now, the Miami Dolphins are on bye. Maybe he returns in week 13. Jalen Waddle's been awesome. Devon Achane's been awesome. Outside of that, like Malik Washington's there. Sure, he's not doing much. There's no other competition for targets. Darren Waller would take over the middle of the field, intermediate routes. And the best part about this is the schedule. Once he comes out of his bye week in week 13, awesome home matchup if he was to return on November 30th against the Saints. Then on December 7th, week 14, he should be back by this, faces a Jets secondary that has been absolutely putrid, especially since trading Sauce Gardner. But it keeps getting better. The Steelers on December 15th, who allow the most passing yards per game. The Bengals at home on December 21st in the fantasy postseason. That is the matchup you want to circle. Darren Waller, assuming you don't have Trey McBride and like Brock Bowers, probably George Kittle, like Darren Waller starts to get in the conversation for like a top 5 tight end ranking if he's active this week at home against the Bengals, because that's how good the matchup is. So Darren Waller to me is somebody that's at least worth a stash right now. He's currently available in over 80% of fantasy leagues. People forgot about him. He had that great 2 to 3 week stretch and then got hurt. And now don't get me wrong, he could come back and get hurt once again. This is a 33-year-old tight end. And I mean, when you think about it, guys like Travis Kelce are much older than that. Guys like Zach Ertz are much older than that, having success weekly in the NFL. But Darren Waller was out of the NFL for a while, which means when you get caught up to game speed, your body, your ligaments, your muscles, your tendons are all more likely to potentially get an injury like we just saw is currently what happened to him. But if he's able to just stay healthy for that beautiful 2 to 3 week stretch in your fantasy postseason, he could be a week in and week out during the fantasy playoffs top 6 tight end. Like that's the upside this guy has. And this next guy has a lot of upside in Philadelphia if Saquon Barkley was to miss any time. And we've already seen Saquon Barkley, by the way, for the audio listeners, I'm talking about Tank Bigsby. He's on the screen right now. We've already gotten a glimpse of what Tank Bigsby could look like when he takes on more opportunities with Saquon Barkley dealing with a groin injury earlier this year. That was back in week 8 where Saquon had 14 carries, 150 yards, multiple touchdowns, his best game of the year against the New York Giants, and then they ended up sitting out the 4th quarter. And during that time, Tank Bigsby took 9 carries for 104 yards. He scored a touchdown in this game. He looked absolutely awesome in this game, having 5 different carries. Of his 9 carries, 5 of them went for 10 plus yards. On his 9 carries, he forced 4 broken tackles. Tank Bigsby, we've seen this guy in the past as recent as 2024 in Jacksonville, where he had 2 weeks from week 7 to 8 look like a star stud running back when Travis Etienne was hurt. I mean, during that time, he went out there and he scored 17.2 points per game as an absolute workhorse on 22 carries per game, 98 rushing yards. This is an Eagles offense that, despite Saquon Barkley not being all that great this year, the offensive line being banged up and continues to be banged up right now, they're still hammering the rock. I mean, Saquon just a week ago had 26 carries. The week before that, he had 22 carries. Like, this is a guy who's being fed. This offense still wants to run the ball at a neutral to above league average rate. And now you get a guy in Tank Bigsby, who they traded for multiple picks earlier this year, who's averaging 9.3 yards per carry as an Eagle. Only 16 carries. It is a small sample. 149 yards. 9.3 yards per carry. This guy has always been, since he came out of college at Auburn into his rookie year, he's always been an efficient runner on the ground. Not going to give you much in the receiving department, but despite the Eagles having banged up offensive line pieces, they're still a quality rush offense, and we've already seen that on his 16 carries this year. And just a reminder, Saquon Barkley is heading into the final stretch of this season. He has dealt with injuries this year, and let's not forget last year, outside of having 345 carries in the regular season, when you factor in his postseason carries and his 33 receptions, he had over 400 touches, well over 400 touches last season, pushing towards 500. We just want to bring that up because he's had a little bit of flirt twice this year, a knee and a groin with some injuries. If he was to miss any weeks, Tank Bigsby likely slots in ahead of Will Shipley as a must-start top 12 RB. Now, another guy who's currently available in 99+ +% of leagues, Taj Brooks. So this is the guy. When everybody comments on the videos, stash this player, add this player, they're already taken in my league. Well, Tank Bigsby, the Darren Waller, they're available in like 80% of leagues. Taj Brooks of the Cincinnati Bengals, 6th round rookie, he's available right now in over 99% of leagues. And here's the thing with Taj Brooks. You look at it, there's no reason to add the guy. He only had 1 carry for 5 yards last week as Chase Brown continued to dominate backfield touches, 18 carries, 99 yards. He added a bunch of receptions, 6 catches this past week for 28 yards. Taj Brooks is nowhere to be found in the receiving department. He basically did absolutely nothing with just 1 carry. I get all that. Right now, Chase Brown looks like an elite running back once again with Joe Flacco, and more importantly, it seems like Samaje Perine has been banged up in this backfield. During this stretch specifically with Joe Flacco, you're seeing 16 fantasy points per game compared to his 4 games before that without Flacco, just 9 points per game for Chase Brown. I bring this up in regards to Taj Brooks because the role is fantastic. The role is great. If something was to happen to Chase Brown, who has remarkably stayed healthy during his NFL career and really the last 2 years, you're going to see Taj Brooks likely step in. Samaje Perine remains banged up. Even if he was to return, he's sort of a different back. Like if something happened to Chase Brown, I think Samaje Perine just stays in his role that he's had, like 2-minute offense, a couple of snaps here and there, and Taj Brooks would take on that early down usage, maybe even red zone usage, because Taj Brooks just profiles out like Chase Brown. In college, Taj Brooks, final 2 years, 291 carries, 286 carries. When you factor in his receptions of about 28 and 29 in his final 2 years, this dude was averaging over 300 touches per year. You know who also did that in college and was very underrated and people didn't think of him as a workhorse? Chase Brown at Illinois had 300 touch seasons. And honestly, when they were drafted, Taj Brooks reminded me a lot of Chase Brown in terms of like if something happened to Chase Brown, this guy could plug and play and be a similar profile fit into the offense. These last 2 weeks without Samaje Perine, Chase Brown has seen an 89% snap share, the highest in the NFL the last 2 weeks, 83% of the rush attempts, 85% of the routes run. These are all amazing numbers because if something was to happen to Chase Brown, maybe they don't give the exact elite #1 in the NFL the last 2 weeks workload to the rookie Taj Brooks, but I do think he'd probably start to see somewhere around 60% of the snaps, 60+% of the backfield carries, and an offense, whether it's Joe Flacco, whether Burrow comes back, that has been able to move the ball nicely the past large part of 2 months. So Taj Brooks, to me right now, who is currently available, and depending on the site that you look at, like some sites will say he's 0% rostered, like less than 1%. He's basically available everywhere, especially if you're a Chase Brown fantasy manager. You might as well just stash him right now. Now, before we get into the next player in this video, I've got something great to share with you. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, where you can turn your game day reads into real payouts fast. All right, now here's how it works. All you do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, from breakout rookies to elite quarterbacks, and watch every snap get way more interesting. The better your calls, the better your payouts. It's basically that simple. There's no convoluted rules. Just pick 2 or more player stats, the more or less on them, and watch your players perform. And now here's the best part for you. Right now, new DraftKings customers that play $5 or more get $50 in Pick 6 credits. So trust your instincts and download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now using code SAL to get in on the action. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. All right, let's talk about a wide receiver now. We got to talk about Luther Burton because this is one of my favorite, probably my favorite upside stash wide receiver. I currently have him in my longest home league right now, just sitting on my bench. And every week it seems like he's getting closer and closer to potentially breaking out. You look at this past week and you say, oh my God, 3 catches, 27 yards. How is he getting closer to breaking out? Well, let's talk about it. They only threw 32 times compared to 40 rush attempts, and Caleb Williams only completed 16 of those passes. So he himself was not all that great, but behind the scenes, under the hood, the usage for Luther Burton for the first time this year saw a significant increase. He became a starting wide receiver. Let me explain. Explain? What kind of word is that? Anyways, you can see right here, DJ Moore, 83% of the routes run, Rome Odunze, 78%. Luther Burton ran 61% of the team's routes as their primary slot wide receiver, ahead of the veteran Olamide Zaccheaus, who has been the starter in every other game this year, ahead of Luther Burton, not this week. Olamide Zaccheaus just 19% of the routes, no targets. You got Luther Burton seeing 61% of the routes, second on the team with an 18% target share behind Rome Odunze. This is very significant. This is a top of the second round pick, easily could have been a first round pick. Luther Burton out of college at Missouri, where he was one of the best wide receivers 2 years ago and a solid wide receiver last year. If he's getting on the field more, you have to take notice. You can see right here from Ryan Lintletter, he says that Luther Burton's only 8% rostered, and this past week he saw a massive playing bump. He played 61% of the routes, like we just said, 18% target share, but look at this, 2.74 yards per route run. Anything over 2 is good. Anything approaching 3 is elite. That's his yards per route run this year is amazing, and he has 3 games of over 50 yards despite playing limited snaps. I do believe that he's emerging right now. DJ Moore is quietly fading away. The past 2 weeks combined, DJ Moore has just 3 fantasy points. He's basically a drop in fantasy at this point. point try and trade him. I just traded him in the Flock League to Bush for Jaden Reed and some fab. I'll just take my upside shot on Jaden Reed late in the season because DJ Moore is basically irrelevant right now. And I think Luther Burton, honestly, between the two of them is the one that I want to be stashing moving forward. This is a player who in 2023 was arguably the best wide receiver in college football with 86 catches. Obviously, Marvin Harrison was there at Ohio State, but that's how good Luther Burton was. He put up a season of 86 catches, over 1,200 yards, a 33% target share, and people were looking at Luther Burton like, oh, wait, hold on. Luther Burton, you're probably going to be a top 10 overall pick in the NFL draft. Until his final year of college, with just quarterbacks and systems changes and his own under-the-hood injuries, he had just 61 yards or 61 catches, half as many yards in basically the same amount of games. It was all weird, which is why he dropped to the second round, but still pretty good draft capital, top of the second round, to join this Bears Ben Johnson offense. And it seems like he's now, after last week, all the signs, the trend line is pushing up for him. He needs to be rostered and stashed at the very least. And Devin Neal also needs to be stashed. He's kind of in the same vein, except I would say a little bit better than the Taj Brooks situation. So if you're not familiar with Devin Neal, he's the New Orleans Saints 6th round rookie running back. And right now the New Orleans Saints depth chart as they come out of their bye week, Kendre Miller's done for the season. It goes Alvin Kamara, a 30-plus-year-old running back late in the season who has dealt with injuries for the past few years. And then Devin Neal. And that's about it. And Devin Neal has been a very reliable player throughout his career, obviously college career at Kansas. I mean, this is a guy who over these past 3 years at Kansas, every single year had over 1,000 rushing yards. He averaged at least 6 yards per attempt, basically every year on average. He had 10 plus touchdowns every year. If you keep scrolling, he had 20 plus catches every single year, which is good for a college running back. Devin Neal was very reliable. That's why he was drafted to the NFL later round, sure, but still drafted to the NFL. And now he looks like a pretty obvious number 2 option behind Alvin Kamara. And again, this is an older running back in Kamara who for the most part this season hasn't looked all that great. The last time we saw the Saints, Kamara actually saw, I believe, a season high 22 carries. He had 115 total yards, 83 yards though, just 3.8 yards per carry. But Devin Neal started to see more usage. 4 carries, 22 yards, looked good on his limited touches in this game. He caught 3 passes as well for 9 yards. In that game specifically, he saw 34% of the snaps. He saw 32% of the routes run. So very quietly, Devin Neal is trending up. He's seeing usage in some key situations as well. You look at the long down and distance snaps, it was Devin Neal seeing 63% of the long down and distance snaps, which is, I would say, very important in terms of just getting on the field in those types of situations over Alvin Kamara. You would never think that that's possible. It has been happening, and now he comes out of his bye week. Maybe he gets a little bit more of a usage bump after the post-bye rookie bump. As just a reminder, Alvin Kamara is 30 years old. The last 2 years, his seasons have been basically either ended or limited by some sort of injuries. We hope that doesn't happen again this year, but Kamara has been a little bit, I would say, less efficient this year. It makes sense as you're in your age 30 season. I think the Saints have a lot of incentive to give Devin Neal more touches down the stretch. Now, I also think we talked about Darren Waller to start the video, a tight end of all things, right? To start the video feels a little bit weird. So having 2 tight ends in this video might seem odd, but I think Chigakonku is actually at least worth bringing up here for a couple of reasons. Let's just start with the fact that the Tennessee Titans, will call it out there, their offense stinks, their offensive line shaky, their rookie quarterback doesn't have a great system, so he hasn't been great, and there's really no pass catchers left for Cam Ward to throw to right now besides Chigakonku. We'll touch on that in a second, but this past week, he led the team with 56 receiving yards. He set up a pretty big field goal late in that game as well with a deep reception of 39 yards late. So I would say that in general here, Chigakonku is starting to look like he could be more of a factor in this offense. They ended up losing that game 16-13. You can see right here, this is the reason why. Calvin Ridley came back for 1 play. It says his first game back from a hamstring. He broke his fibula, broke his leg, is done for the season. He literally, according to PFF, logged 1 snap in that game. Unfortunately for Calvin Ridley, hamstring, pretty serious, comes back, breaks his leg. It's absolutely terrible to see. But that wasn't the only injury they suffered in this game, because they lost, at least entering the season, what was their number 1 wide receiver. Chamir Deke is dealing with a concussion, which odds are he'll miss at least a game. We now have Alec Imanor, their other rookie, who is currently dealing with a hamstring injury. Oh yeah, a couple of weeks ago, they allowed Tyler Lockett, who granted his release. They released him. He's now on the Raiders. Like, what you're looking at this week, for this week specifically, if Alec Imanor dealing with a hamstring, which normally is a multi-week injury, if he's not able to play, we know Ridley's not playing. Chamir Deke concussion, probably not playing. You're looking at a wide receiver room of Van Jefferson this week, and I don't know, maybe Xavier Restrepo, the former wide receiver at Miami for Cam Ward, gets involved. There's like nobody left. Who the heck is Bryce Oliver? Who is Mason Kinsley? I mean, he might be the guy who actually plays. I believe he has some pass success, or not success, just reps in the NFL. I mean, this is brutal. So why do I bring this up? Because I literally think that Chigakonku, whether it's this week or moving forward, is the best pass catcher on the Tennessee Titans. Even when Alec Imanor is healthy, even when Chamir Deke is healthy, although Deke is a little bit closer in terms of best pass catcher, but I do think it's the tight end, Chigakonku. And this is the same tight end that towards the end of last season, with arguably worse quarterback play, started started to come alive for Tennessee. From weeks 12 to 17 last year, Okonkwo was a top 10 tight end, averaging 6.5 targets per game. Again, that was like a different coaching staff at this point, different personnel, definitely a different quarterback. So it doesn't like directly correlate, but it at least shows you that he could be a force in the middle of the field. And at one point, he was one of the most efficient tight ends way back in his rookie year in the NFL. Somebody down the stretch, if you've been having a nightmare time at tight end this year, to at least keep in mind. And you should keep in mind Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams, because this is not a guy that you can start right now, but he's absolutely somebody you should stash. This past week, he saw 8 carries compared to 12 for Kyren Williams. Now, let's be honest here. Kyren was way better, averaging 7.6 yards per carry, 91 yards in this game. Blake Corum's 8 carries went for just 10 yards. He's also had mistakes. We're talking fumbles, things like that over the past couple of weeks, so that's not going to help him. It was pretty brutal overall. He also caught a pass, Blake Corum, in this game for a negative 5 yards. So week 11 was disgusting, but he still just saw 4 less carries than Kyren Williams, and he continues to be heavily involved in this offense, especially compared to last year's. Like, he's playing 32% of the snaps, which doesn't sound like anything crazy. Kyren is obviously still commanding the backfield at 68%, but 36% of the rush attempts for Kyren, barely getting half the rush attempts, is noteworthy. And let's not forget, Kyren Williams last year was playing 88% of the snaps. So his workload has obviously dropped back. He's lost about 20 to 25 to 30%, depending on the game, his snap share this year. Kyren is still the RB1 here. Blake Corum's not stealing his job. But if Kyren was to miss time, and again, I've said it before, Kyren has dealt with these foot and ankle injuries basically every year of his career. If he was to miss time, Blake Corum steps into maybe the best team in the NFL, the best offense maybe in the NFL as their lead back. That is noteworthy, and that is why Blake Corum needs to be stashed. I have it here in my notes. He's only rostered in 17% of leagues. If you're a Kyren Williams fantasy manager and it looks like you're going to make the postseason, you need Blake Corum on your team as a security handcuff. All right, we're talking about stashes at every single position. If you want to see my #1 waiver wire ad, I put together a guide for you for this week. It's completely free. You can check it out with the link in the description below, or by typing into your device, head to the browser and just type in waiverwins.com, all one word, waiverwins.com, and that will get you to the guide. You just enter your email and I'll email to you. Be sure to check your spam and promotional folders if you don't see it. All right, next up, let's talk about a real exciting player. This is Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell is somebody who has his most touches. He just saw his most touches of the entire season compared to Justice Hill this past week. You saw 6 touches for 31 yards for Keaton Mitchell compared to Justice Hill having 0 carries in this game. You look at the receiving department, Keaton Mitchell 2 catches for 23 yards, Justice Hill 0 catches in this game. So we're getting a situation now where Keaton Mitchell just touched the ball in a meaningful game for the Ravens, where they're trying to win every game possible to make the postseason, win the division. He just touched the ball 8 times this past week for over 50 yards. He was averaging like 7-8 yards per touch. He looked awesome out there. This is an extreme athlete. Running backs that have hit 20 miles or more on 3 or more carries this year, you can see Jonathan Taylor's done it, although he has 189 rush attempts, right? A bunch of these other guys. Keaton Mitchell has done it 3 times on just 15 rushes. It's taken Breece Hall and Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry 158 rushes to do the same. He is arguably right up there with Devon Achane. Sorry, I was just getting a phone call. Where were we? Yes, Keaton Mitchell is arguably the fastest, right up there with Devon Achane. I believe they were the same draft class, although Mitchell went undrafted, as the fastest running back in the NFL, and he finally seems to be healthy. I mean, this is a guy who's averaging 6.4 yards per touch on his limited touches this year. Back in his rookie year, he was averaging like 9 yards per touch. It was an NFL record if he would have had enough touches to qualify for it. This guy is absolutely fantastic, and let's not forget, Derrick Henry is the guy here. It's almost December when he just dominates. The weather's getting colder. We just saw him have a big game this past week. He has 100 yards in 2 out of his last 3 games since Lamar came back. But if Derrick Henry, if he ever was to have some sort of injury, ever, right? If he was to have that, I think you're going to see Keaton Mitchell break out. He's not a big running back. Keaton Mitchell is a very small running back. He was drafted at 179 pounds, but we've seen these smaller running backs find a lot of success lately. Devon Achane being the biggest one of those names. So even Kyren Williams, who we talked about, is somewhat smaller, like 199 pounds. James Cook, all these guys, Jahmyr Gibbs, right? So if Keaton Mitchell saw more opportunities, he only just saw like this past week 8. If he was to see like 12 to 15 a week, if Henry was to miss time, that is potentially a flex or RB2 option for you in the postseason. He is somebody worth stashing. Jayden Reed is also worth stashing. As of this recording, he's not having his 21-day practice window open up this week, so he is, I believe that now means he is officially going to miss week 12. The Packers do play on a short week in week 13 against the Lions on Thanksgiving, so maybe he doesn't return then. So you're probably looking at maybe a week 13 return, but probably a week 14 return right in time for your fantasy playoffs. And this is a guy who has been meaningful in fantasy football. You look at his past seasons with Jordan Love as his quarterback during this entire time, 13.6 fantasy points per game, 11.6 fantasy points per game last year. He started off this season having 13 points and a touchdown before getting hurt early on in week 2. So this is a guy who the Packers need right now. They still have some weapons on offense. You have guys like Romeo Doubs there. You have Matthew Golden healthy. Maybe he starts to break out. You have Christian Watson, but they have lost pieces here, right? You lost Tucker Kraft, probably the biggest piece of this offense. As of this recording, they're saying Josh Jacobs is day-to-day, but who knows at this point? He's probably going to miss at least 1 week. They need need playmakers on offense right now. Christian Watson has been that lately, but losing Tucker Kraft, I think Jayden Reed slides into that exact same part in the field. Middle of the field, intermediate to deep, yards after the catch ability. All right, now the next guy I got to talk about is Brian Robinson, because I was shocked to see how available he is. He's currently available in 72% of fantasy leagues as of this recording, despite being not only one of the best handcuffs in fantasy, but recently, very quietly, the 49ers have been ramping up his usage, and he's actually been a solid flex option the past 2 games. 2 weeks ago, he sees 8 carries, 41 yards, and a touchdown in that game. He's scoring double-digit fantasy points compared to McCaffrey just seeing 12 carries. McCaffrey's usage and snaps dropped down in this game. Now, this past week, McCaffrey goes back to having 28 carries. He catches a bunch of passes as well. He has 35 touches, but Brian Robinson's still looking good. 5 carries, 53 yards, and a touchdown, double-digit fantasy points yet again. This is a player who this season is the clear and obvious, probably best handcuff in fantasy football, up there as a top 3 with other names we've mentioned like Tank Bigsby. And he's been highly efficient this year. He's averaging 4.6 true yards per carry, which ranks top 12 amongst all running backs. It's been significantly better than what Christian McCaffrey as a runner has done so far this season. He's been a top tier player when it comes to yards per touch, when it comes to expected points added, his EPA and efficiency metric, and when it comes to his overall juke rate and broken tackles. You can see this tweet from Ian Hartitz right here. Only 3 running backs have gained 3+ yards after contact on more than 50% of their carries this year. Number 3 on that list is Baishal Tootin, 51% of his carries. Number 2 is Aaron Jones at 52%. Number 1 is Brian Robinson on 54% of his carries. He's gained at least 3+ yards after contact. And let's not forget, this is a running back who is playing behind Christian McCaffrey, who there's a lot of concerns with an aging Christian McCaffrey, and they are loading this guy up right now. Do you know how many touches per game Christian McCaffrey has? Let me show you right now. Just carries alone. He leads the NFL, by the way, amongst running backs in targets per game with 8.7 and carries per game at 17.5. This dude is literally averaging like 27 opportunities per game as a guy who's dealt with injuries in the past, tendonitis, which does heal after about, like 4 to 6 months. So he should be good off of that one. Like it shouldn't come back up and linger the same type of tendonitis. But this is still an older running back taking on a large workload. Any running back in the NFL week in and week out has injury risk, especially one that's going to get the ball 30 times per game. And the last time we saw Christian McCaffrey miss time, do you remember what happened there? Jordan Mason came in. Let's scroll down to it over on Player Profiler. We'll come over here. We'll go to his 2024 game logs. What did Jordan Mason do during that 4-week stretch when he was the lead back? 22 fantasy points, 17, 11, 24 in the San Francisco 49ers offense. That feels pretty good. Jordan Mason and Brian Robinson's grade out as similar players. They don't catch a lot of passes. They're both efficient runners on the ground who can break tackles. Brian Robinson needs to be rostered in every single fantasy league. So these are the players that you should stash in your fantasy league before your friends do, and more importantly, before the fantasy playoffs come, and potentially one of these names, maybe multiple of them, become league winners. And now before your trade deadline hits, if you want to see the players you should trade for to improve your fantasy team and ultimately take home a fantasy championship, this video dropped earlier in the week. It will help you with that exactly.